driven, purposeful, resilience, integrity. Okay, very well, very well. Trust, very well. Okay, flexibility. Thank you already for all those comments. I think that this already starting with sharing with an interesting insight on that. So basically what I'm going to do now is to share my reflection around 7 different ideas. Basically, there are 7 inputs I want to share with you to construct this reflection. Right? It will start with something more visible and also probably more tangible. We can see, sense it easier. And for leaders, it might be easier to engage in that space. And little by little, we are going to move into something a little more elaborated and eventually more complex and more challenging and maybe more abstract. But they are kind of connected together that can enable each other. Okay, so that's basically the sequence of these 7 elements I'm going to share with you. Let me start with the first one, which I think that you have already sensed that very much. I already saw lots of comments starting with this point. Okay, the first one, indeed, as many of you have said, is about empathy, right? Why empathy? I think that all of us, lots of us, most of the people suffered during this challenging year, either because of the disruption in the business or at work or family, personal situations. Basically, it's a painful moment to be. People and managers are forced to work harder and maybe in a more challenging way, uncomfortable way. We have to adapt to new habits of life and work, etc. So it's a challenging moment. And probably you can think about that when we are in this situation, in this new stage, what kind of experiences, what kind of emotion you might experience the most often. So here, maybe I would like to invite you again to quickly type, which emotion seem to tend to be the most oftenly appearing, most present during this time, during this new normal stage in you. Okay, I see already frustration, loneliness, confusion. That's something positive from Pablo. So calmness, that's good. Uncertainty, lack of clarity, sense of distance, lack of presence, anguish. Very well, very well. I think this is something depressed, very much commonly felt, not only among us, but basically in the wider sense of the society and among people working, right? So there is lots of things very similar to what you have said, right? This kind of loneliness, fear, frustration, confusion, even anger, why this happened, and basically why I'm suffering. This experiences is quite general. And you probably can imagine if this negative feeling, emotions accumulated at work, inside of you, or maybe in your department, in your company, etc., what kind of effect it can generate. Eventually, people might suffer either for lack of focus, maybe less motivated, less engaging, or even they might be physical consequences. Maybe physically we are less agile, we would be drained, our energy will be drained by all these elements. So it basically will have some negative effect on how we can perform. So the question is that how can leaders address that? Can we be more empathetic to take care and to address those negative emotions felt currently by workers, right? So caring, we probably need to be more caring. So that's one important way to really bring people back to a more balanced moment without being carried away by this negative emotion. So probably you can ask yourself these 2 questions. One is whether your leader understand your feelings and emotions during this transition into the new normal. Some of you probably will say yes. Then you are fortunate. You have a good leader who can somehow connect well to your feeling and emotion and address that. The second one is yourself. If you are already in a leadership position, then the question is that, do you understand well the feelings and emotions of people you're leading, right? So basically how you connect, do you show this empathy and care to people? These are things might not be challenging to do, difficult to do, but however, we need to be carefully engaging in that. That being said, I think that there's the important thing to be taking to be careful is on the other side of a picture is that empathy has its cost. Empathy definitely had its bright side, But can you imagine the negative things, negative side, negative impacts of empathy can bring? So lots of research has already revealed that, right? So this is there's a book published by Paul Bloom. Basically, the title already talking about against empathy, because basically he revealed that when someone is very empathetic, the capability basically being able, you can feel others' feeling, then there are some negative things that can come with it. First of all, that's narrowing your perspective. You feel that you're so much connected to the person in front of you. So you basically are focusing on this single person. So he called it as dangerous spotlight. As a result of that, we tend to have kind of a bias towards smaller in-group, that's people that you can see, you can feel, you can connect to, and it might make you ignore the larger good, right? And eventually make your decision and action very emotional driven. That's a big challenge that you probably want to avoid. And additionally, there are other research saying something very similar as well. So another piece of very recently published paper basically demonstrating that when CEOs are highly empathetic, there are some benefits they can get in their management of crisis. I won't be able to go into detail here, but you can see those blue boxes. They are positive impact of being empathetic in managing best crisis as a CEO. But at the same time, the same paper also proposed that they are downsides. Okay, basically you might be too attentive, too sensitive to false alarm. You might process information with bias, etc., etc. So it's not only about that you just have to be empathetic at all costs, basically go to the extreme. So the idea is that empathy needs to be balanced with rationality. You need to also be able to see the big picture again. So that sometimes, because as a leader, you might sometimes need to make tough decisions. In this new normal, in this pandemic time, eventually you might need to cut people's salary. Eventually you might need to leave people go, laying off people because of the survival of the company, etc. They are tough, but eventually we need to go to that space. So if we have only empathy, then it would be very challenging or even impossible for people to really go into this space. So that's basically an important point to bring this element into the balance part. Rationality, empathy, but coupled with rationality, okay? But the question is that still, we need to be careful that empathy might not always be present in this challenging moment. Even if we need to make these tough decisions, we can still do it in an empathetic way. I will quickly share with this interesting example. I don't know whether you know about this company. So this is a Silicon Valley-based startup, basically founded in 2017. It's like a unicorn. Basically, they are creating this kind of scooter renting platform sharing, right? So they are hit as well by the pandemic last year. They needed to lay off. Basically, they needed to lay off 400 workers among 1,400. So basically, it's a big proportion of their workers will be laid off. However, the way they did it, quite unfortunately, is basically just schedule a Zoom meeting calling COVID-19 update. And then when people log into this meeting, these 400 people, they heard like 2 minutes recorded voice telling them that they are no longer needed. They are eventually fired, laid off, right? So basically, they were these elements generated lots of very big emotional responses, not only from people being laid off. You can imagine already what kind of shock they felt, but even the people that stayed, right? They feel also frustrated. How can we treat people in this way? And what is also interesting is that you can imagine nowadays how fast information can circulate, right? By in social media, people will learn about these events, and eventually you know that the 2 minutes recording has been recorded. So that recording has been circulated as well. They are available now if you want to listen to the recording, right? What kind of consequence it has generated to people, to company? Can you see any hurt that it generates to the company, right? Not only the people leaving, but also people staying. What kind of message you are telling them, what kind of company we are, and eventually even for future, when you want to hire to attract talent again, what might happen? Just to show you that if you go to this company's Wikipedia page, this event has already entered into their entry. And you probably can imagine these elements will stay with them quite a long time, if not forever, Okay, so people will somehow see that, okay, this is a culture, this is an element there. And this basically come to you is that how we treat our employee today will have consequences, impact on our brand in the future years than any advising. So being empathetic, that's something critical. Even if we want to make difficult, tough decisions like laying off people, you can do it with more empathy, right? There's another counter example coming from Airbnb. This is also an industry, a company that has been hit hard because of the basically tourism has been basically shut down. But even if we need to lay off 25% of our staff, it can be done with more personal caring and empathy. Okay, so this is the first element. The first element of this LINN, I call it as leadership in new normal, okay, is empathy, caring for people with empathy, but coupled with rationality. So to carefully manage people's needs and emotion in this transition into the new normal. Okay, that's basically the first one. Second element, social bridging. What does that mean? Basically, one important element coming with this COVID-19 or new normal is the social distancing policy that many governments introduced. Right? We need to keep distance with people so that we are not going to be contaminated. Because of that, we do not go to the office that often. Offices are closed down, or maybe with only limited capacity to be active. So we need to work from home, or we do not see our colleagues a lot. How do we coordinate our work? And this is a situation that is going to stay. So according to the prediction of Bill Gates, he will see that half of the business travel will go away, and along with a third of the working in the office. So in the future, as a leader, you need to lead. You need to be capable of leading people and foster collaboration when people are not in front of you. They are maybe far kilometers away. And then how do you make it happen? Right. This is a big topic because of a time constraint. I would like to just quickly make one short illustration, okay? But we will not be able to fully go into that.
Je suis Jean-Edmond.
So this is a video that has been produced by the National Orchestra of France. Many other orchestra produced that. Basically, during the big lockdown last year, they could no longer perform in the concert. So basically, they decided to produce this video, record this video individually at home, and combine them together, and then basically to share this kind of sense of art and joy to people. Okay, so I would not be able to play it. I think you can find these similar videos in many different places, just to let you see a little bit how they are doing. So one-on-one musician joining, and they connect, because this piece is a interesting thing that you are increasing the complexity of the play. And then finally, they performed and delivered this piece. Okay, maybe just to listen it to 15 seconds. Let's quickly do that. Okay. So that's it. You probably can do it later if you are enjoying the music. So the point I want to bring out here is to invite you to think that how can we make it? Typically, an orchestra need to perform together when they sit together with a conductor. Right? Now they are doing something similar, producing the same result. However, when they are spread in so many different places, right? What are the coordinating mechanisms that enabled such production of this result? Yeah. So what are the key, what do you think? Let me quickly invite you to share your thought again, maybe by chat. So what kind of mechanism have they been using, relying or maybe mobilizing so that they can collectively still create this nicely performed video? Please briefly share your thoughts by chat. Okay, synchronization, a great editor, solidarity, love for music, technology, really listening, teamwork, trust, coordination, yeah, and a quick track to play to, yeah, time management, clear instructions, coordination, common music score, very well, very well. Yeah, creativity. I think you touch upon very much the vision. Yeah, great. Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you. Okay, resilience. Yeah. So basically, let me share also maybe from my side. I think that we have already very aligned understanding about what has happened. Here are something that I think personally I captured from what I see and think about how they do it, right? So first of all, there's an interesting shared purpose, which means that all these players, they know why for what they are doing this. They want to generate something positive for the society. So this desire, this shared purpose basically is an underlying driver, basically connect people. They are emotionally connected to say that we want to do something good. And this shared purpose is translated into something clear and aligned into kind of operational objective, that is production of this video. And then the musicians, they have clear mutual knowledge. They know each other. They know what to expect from each other, when and how each other can play and contribute. And they have also confirmed competencies. So they know their qualification, they are professional, and they have been playing before. So they are trust among them. Interpersonally, they know each other. They know task-wise, they can trust each other as well. And then they also generate already some interpersonal bonding. They have this kind of social friendship, connection, and sense of belonging. And also, very importantly, they are clear scripts for them to collaborate, common, collectively, or individually. And then this is a music score you mentioned before, right? And also reliable tools for connecting and coordination, also technology, recording, videos, etc. So when we put this together, I would like to propose 3 big categories of elements for us to think and maybe to translate into our own context. Basically, you can see that there's 3 different boxes, and they somehow reflects 3 different dimensions of behaviors. The first one is on cognitive side, okay, our understanding, thinking. The second is on our emotional side. The third one on our behavior side. And these are elements I call social bridging. So basically, a leader need to create this social bridging to connect people at these 3 levels. Let people understand each other. Okay, can understand meaning that understand individually a person, competences, but also the context, the situation the person is in. We also need to produce this connection at the emotional side, so we feel we are connected. We like each other. We feel belonging each other. We trust each other. There's a shared identity. Okay, this needs to also be fostered. And also there's a behavior connection, meaning that we also need to know clearly what is the script, what is the expected behavior we want to see on each other. All these things need to be clearly defined when we cannot see each other. So social bridging is one way to overcome the problem created by social distancing. Okay, so there's no single right answer that we can just provide, but this basically you need to translate these principles into your personal context when you lead the remote work. But these are important principles that leaders nowadays need to master. Okay, and one thing that I think we talk about, that the use of tools is also critical. What kind of tools can we use? So we need to also learn technology and also master some tools, because the tool we use, the technology we use, might define what are possible, what are not possible, and it might limit our potential or foster our way of approaching things creatively. So do you know the tools? Do we know well the tools? So how do we connect? Which media? Now we are using Zoom. What are other availabilities of tools? And what are their pros and cons? I think this will be something that require our deeper understanding and investment of time and energy to understand that as well. They are tools for collaboration, for brainstorming, for generate ideas or creating something. That's probably something we need to also start to know how to mobilize it. Sometimes there are some interesting tools, maybe more provocative and maybe more radical. We can think about, how do we monitor people? Are they really working? When they work from home, when we don't see them, how do we know they are performing? And nowadays, there are tools for monitoring people, tracking their activities, right? So this tool, Hubstaff, is an interesting tool. Basically, they offer very detailed possibilities to track people, right? Including how many hours are you working with a computer, activity levels, how much you are moving your mouse or click your keyboards, even screenshot. They can screenshot you every 10 minutes randomly 3 times, your idle time, which app you are using, which website you are visiting, even where you are, right? So this is something I think a little bit controversial. I would like to just raise this to you to see, there are some availability of tools, but be very careful in using this tool, because basically when we are using this, it somehow indicates there might be a lack of trust on to the people you are working with you, right? So what do you want to control? Do you want to control the inputs? Like here, basically you control their inputs, how much time they put into, we're not really working on that. Or do you want to control output? Then you don't care how much time, how much activity they are doing, right? So think very carefully what is needed and respect people and basically design your work properly, okay? So this is the second point, okay? Social bridging with respect. Mastering the tool and social dynamics to connect people across various boundaries and lead remote work with respect of individuality and eventually diversity. Each person has its own setting, family condition. Understand that, connecting them well. Okay. The third element then is about designing the work. This is coming from the remote work we talked before. We are not going to be turning 100% into remote work, right? Part of that moving to the remote, but some of us still need to go to office. You can see that it would be not just 1 or 0. It's basically a mixture. But the question is how much, right? How much of this kind of physical footprint is required? What is the right combination? This is a organizational design question. So how many people should be present? How much percentage of them at their time? Can you answer that question according to your need? There are also needs for people that has to come, because not every worker can just work from home. There are factories, there are different places that require your presence, services. So how do you redesign the workplace that guarantee people's safety, allowing the new functioning to get into there, right? Like in Ferrari, the production site. How do you redesign the flow? And even culture. How do you redefine the culture? Because the change of things we mentioned before, remote work, presence, etc., that will affect culture as well. What kind of culture do you need to foster that enable you to function in a more effective way in the new setting, right? Particularly, I'm now referring to Netflix, because one of their cultural feature, which is very interesting and maybe corresponds very well to what we are talking about in this stage, that is freedom and responsibility. Can you give freedom to people when you don't see them, but they are responsible for the result? You can hold them accountable, right? So this basically leads us to the next point. Leaders nowadays need to be more consciously perform this role as organizational architect. You need to design consciously, intentionally about how you want people to work. But do we know what is the right proportion of this mixture of presential and remote work? Do we have the answer? Sometimes maybe not, right? So this design might need to rely on a kind of design process. You might need to try, ideate, prototype, and test them and see how it goes. And this kind of refinement process, we talk about this kind of experiment as well, right? COVID-19 forces us to experiment. We might not know the answer right away, but we can learn, we can try. But the idea is that we need to be ready to engage in this kind of experimentation. How can we experiment? Here, I think that another interesting element to here is that this requires eventually a kind of combination of the two sides. On the one hand, we need kind of creativity, the design part. However, design is not just designing in the empty space. You need also the capability to mobilize data to support your judgment and assessment. So which data are useful for you? What kind of data do you need to collect, start to process, so that you can make right decisions? Even when you try something out, you can somehow use those information to improve, enhance your next stage of operation. Right? This will be the new requirement for leaders today as well. Right? So it's basically a combination of creativity, hard science, soft science, imagination, but also a more conscious and also capable mobilization of data, how you design the data into your whole process. We don't have time to go into that, but just to point out some directions, okay? And to do that also requires us to be ready to fail and ready to accept failure, because we can always learn from that. In fact, this word might not be accurate, because eventually there is no failure if we can learn something from it, okay? So every step is just like one process going towards basically the improvement of the next step. Okay, so there's basically no failure per se, but can you start to also foster this kind of acceptance to try things out and maybe accepting imperfection? Okay, this is point number 3. Your role in reconfiguring work and organization, assuming the role of organizational architect to intentionally and strategically design how people work, including structure, right? The presence, proportion of remote work, no remote work, process, culture, with experiment and data. Okay. Well, but when we need to design things, then they need to be guided by something. Number 4 is vision. So which direction are we moving toward? So as many of us are living inside this, we are in the world currently with a very high level of uncertainty, right? According to this index, you can see that we are probably at the highest level of uncertainty over the last decades, eventually in many human being existence in the history, right? So in this high uncertainty situation, lots of people get confused. We don't see clearly the future, and we feel confusion, uncertainty, etc. Where are we heading? Lots of workers will be asking these questions. And when we have these questions, basically we are looking into leaders. The leaders now definitely also have this responsibility to craft and somehow offer such answer. If you want to leading meaning that you are influencing people going towards some direction. If you don't know or don't have this idea about where we want to go to, how can we lead? Vision and direction setting. Vision meaning this is a mental image derived from your understanding and interpretation of the complexity about the current and future state, right? You need to capture first the complexity nowadays. However, when we formulate a vision, this vision needs to be shaped in the way that is simple enough so people can access to it. They can understand and capture that easily, and that can guide people's meaning and to coordinate collective effort toward the future. Okay, so this is interesting, like paradox here as well, that is combination of complexity and simplicity, right? But this vision providing is critical. But if we cannot see clearly, what can we do? If we have also doubts, what can we do? Another thing is basically we need to make the effort, right? So this is an interesting book published in 2014. Then basically Morgan, he proposed that the difference between the past work and future work. Lots of the future work he mentioned at that time are happening now, which means that there are some trends that can be foreseen. You can somehow get some feeling about what we are heading to. So the question is that whether we are spending our energy and time in foreseeing, understanding, embracing, and monitoring the future. So this is basically the full future-looking strategic thinking. This is basically also require our additional and conscious work into this space as a leader. Another important task is on the purpose side. Sometimes we still cannot see fully what is happening, and purpose will come in now as an anchor and guideline. So even we do not see clearly how the world will be changing, but we know what we want to serve and the purpose, the why. You can still provide this element to guide yourself and guide your company, your people, even in the huge, great uncertainty. Okay. So, however, when we provide strategic vision and purpose, we probably still need to recognize that potentially we do not know. So the potential vulnerability, the potential ignorance, and you can allow people to co-create, contribute, co-creation of the vision with a sense of humility. We don't need to be the almighty, all-known leader in this space. This is point number 4, okay? A leader with vision and purpose, offering vision and purpose with humility. Well, number 5, that touch upon transformation. Lots of things we discussed earlier require reconfiguring things, changing things. You might need to guide people to adapt to a new situation. This require change, differences, adaptation. Can we do that easily? Many of you probably has already know that it's a challenging task. It's not easy task. And primarily the reason come from multiple sides, but one important thing is an interesting trade-off between our expertise and flexibility. Right? Expertise means that when we master something, you are very good. You have the competencies in doing some task. Very often it involves two types of automation. One is behavior. For example, when you learn to drive a car, when you really drive the car, you know it well, you don't need to think about it. It's almost automatic. You can listen to the music, you can talk to people, you can do lots of things. So there's a kind of connection between your expertise on something and the automation of that behavior, because you practice that a lot and that become an expertise. However, this comes with a price, because this make you embedded in something. This can be personal, like your personal automation of your behavior. It can also be corporate routine that you developed, the practice you developed in the company, that you probably will be locked in that process. Right? And also on the mind side, on not only in our behavior, but even the way we think, there is also a trade-off between expertise and flexibility. There's a phenomenon we call cognitive entrenchment. We might be entrenched in a certain way in how we look into the world, right? Neuroscience, I already mentioned about that. So the way our brain is connected, there are some neurons that has been structured in a certain way. So when we learn something, we create some connections among these neuron cells, and then we form some pathways. Some are stronger, that guide our thinking more easily. Some are weaker, and some might not exist yet or anymore. And this pattern generally create a stable pattern of our perspective, our mindset, our thinking. It might not be easy to shift away from that. Right? So my colleague and good friend, John Amandos, published an interesting empirical paper studying the problem of experts become liabilities. Right? So he studied basically lots of banks in the USA and found that the more experts they have in the board, the likely they are going to fail when they are in uncertain and decision-making context. The last sentence is important. When we are in stable time, expert is good. But when we enter into a high level of uncertainty, things are changing, moving a lot, then your expertise will become a liability, because we cannot change and move and adapt easily. Okay, so this is something leaders nowadays need to be more aware, because this basically will generate one effect we call curse of expertise. That is when our past strength or even current strengths become a limitation for change toward the future. Okay, and this can translate into different kind of traps: expertise trap, asset trap. What kind of asset do you have? Talent trap. What kind of talent do you have in the company? Can you change them? Culture trap. What kind of culture you have created? All these things are not that easy to change in short time. And basically, but they came from your expertise, your strengths before. So it's an interesting trade-off that how do you balance the two things? Okay. So one important thing to start with is to enlarge our space of possibility. Like we have seen before, sometimes the problem is that we don't see it. So basically you don't see this possible. We are limited in our mindset. So we can enlarge it by internally questioning our assumptions, but also by being able to seek external stimulus, and also challenged by some diverse ideas and diverse people, diverse thinking. Okay, this is an interesting book. If you want to look into that, that can offer you some interesting insight. The science of seeing things differently. Okay, but another important thing is to balance change and continuity. Because basically the expertise in the past, meaning that you probably don't want to throw it fully away. And also people resist change because they feel uncomfortable of being abandoned or basically just changing without any connection to the past. So the real capacity for change is the capability to create this possibility to combine those things together. You provide a vision of change, but while at the same time, you create local mechanisms for people to leverage their past expertise, leverage their identity. They see a continuation of their mission, their purpose, and something that they basically can leverage on. That's basically one way that enable you to see things in a wider sense without feeling threatened, and then being able to move things forward. So this is point number 5, enabling learning and transformation in your leadership role, by creating larger space of possibility and new routines, and then while you maintain a sense of continuation and continuity. Number 6, we come back to the self, right? Lots of things we discussed earlier are challenging, difficult, and require lots of resources, energy, and thinking. Can we do that? So basically, one question is that how solid, how calm, how well we are, because our self is an important source of our strength. When we are hit by our negative emotions, when we feel frustrated, when we are in panic, our mind might not be able to function properly. We might fall into the traps of our own qualities in the past. When we are in self-doubt, we might engage in activities or actions of self-sabotage. For example, like how the company Bird fired people. Why do you do that? It's probably you, the CEOs, the leaders, they are making decisions maybe not under their best condition. Right? How can you create deeper self-knowledge and self-confidence in handling and more peace to handle and confront such a situation is also critical. So how do you take care of our own physical and mental well-being? Because this is a moment that our self is put on test. So when our qualities, if we are not aware about that, it become liability, like we mentioned before. Okay. So this is an important moment for us to develop habit, practices, and also tactics to somehow create better inner space. And somehow you can connect, you can restore energy, you can restore peace, and broaden your perspective. When we are in like chaotic situation, in movement, confusion, it's very difficult to get that energy to confront all the challenges that we have mentioned before. But here, also, I want to give a word of warning. When we say leading oneself, taking care of oneself, it's not about just thinking only about oneself. Right? When we become too self-centered, self-serving, there's a study talking about this narcissistic leadership, we probably will also not go very far. So there are lots of negative consequences that can come with this kind of narcissistic approach, thinking only with me in the center, right? So basically, one thing that taking good care of oneself, however, be very conscious of your role as leader to lead and to contribute to all the functions we have mentioned before. That is to serve, right? You need to serve people that you lead, serve the company, serve the society. So this is a process to take care of yourself for a higher purpose, not only just to be good, to be well on your own. So this is number 6, leading oneself, developing deeper self-knowledge and stronger self-leadership towards so that you can enable energy and personal resources with a spirit of service. Finally, the last one is probably a more high-level abstract one. Okay, it's probably also interesting and challenging to engage, but I want to share this with you. Dynamic balancing. Probably you have already noticed in commenting on all the points before, I mentioned again and again this word of balancing. You need to balance things out. This is not just only one way, okay? So in fact, even new normal, it brings us new constraints, whether you can move or not, you can travel or not. However, at the same time, it also creates new space, new degree of freedom. What you can do now, you can spend your time at your work at time, your time at home, etc. So there are new freedom that has been created. So it's a kind of interesting duality, not all good or all bad, but you need to combine these two perspectives. So going back to what we have seen before, basically all the things that require this kind of multiple and dynamic balancing in your leadership role. We have to be empathetic, have individual consideration, but at the same time, keep the big picture, rationality, looking into the collective goods. We need to handle short-term imperatives, at the same time, taking care of long-term goals. Combining remote work and presential work, relying on intuition, your leadership judgment, but also backed up by data. Seeing complexity, but also being able to translate that into simplicity, expertise, flexibility, transformation, continuity, right? Leading yourself, but serving others, being very human, having this kind of humanistic approach, but being capable of handling technology, machine, AI. Eventually, at a high level, it's basically require you to combine art and science, okay? So even the pandemic, the new normal per se, can be seen as both challenges and opportunities. This can be our leadership moment, okay? So point number 7, developing a mindset and capabilities to address issues with multiple and dynamic balancing guided by clear value when you need to really make a judgment. Okay. So these are basically the 7 elements I formulated based on my interaction and reflection with people. And so to summarize quickly, they are basically interconnected. Okay. So basically, as I mentioned earlier, we start with something most tangible, visible, maybe easier to engage, being empathetic, but little by little, you move on to the higher level, maybe require more effort, attention, and conscious work, right? Number 1, empathy, but balanced, coupled with rationality, okay? Social bridging, but be careful, combined with this respect of individuality, diversity. Designing work, reconfiguring your work, coupled with experiment when we don't know exactly what is happening out there. And this reconfiguration design need to be guided by some vision. When we are in certainty, this vision and even purpose can guide people, guide us. But we do this with humility, recognizing that we are not almighty, we don't know everything yet. That's basically recognizing this to engage people to collectively co-create potentially such vision and purpose. And then to do that, also enable learning and transformation while keeping this continuity so people have a sense of security and continuity. Number 6, leading oneself, but with a spirit of serving others. Finally, in the center, this is kind of balancing concept, dynamic balancing guided by values. And I think that you probably can find a way to connect these points. Basically, they are interconnected. When you are doing well in one element, that might enable you to somehow get deeper vision, understanding about people. You can take care of them, enable your vision, so they can somehow have a kind of mutually reinforcing structure. There is no empirical study yet. This is my personal projection, okay, my hypothesis. So when we talk about this new leadership competencies in the new normal, I'm expecting that there are quite a few positive outcomes can be generated by this kind of collection of behaviors: trust, commitment, understanding, creativity, resilience, alignment, well-being, etc. If a leader can perform, can really engage in all these elements, your company, your people might generate, maybe somehow be able to somehow come up with these positive outcomes. Well, the question is that, going back to my original question in the beginning, right? So are these the old traditional conventional leadership competencies, or are there new things? I don't know what do you think in seeing this picture? So my personal interpretation of this is that it's both. It combines both. You can see there are quite a few elements that are classics. They are basically leaders from ancient time. They need to do that already. So, but now maybe you need to do it more, right? Because maybe more empathy, more kind of connection is needed. So there are some traditional things that is there, but there are also some new elements, including experimentation, using of data, basically combination. Even this kind of balancing elements, designing work. In the past, sometimes work leaders might not need to do so many things. But I think that you probably can understand that in the new normal, the task of leadership will not be easier, right? You probably won't say that, okay, we are entering the time leader can be like just easier to perform the job. The world is more challenging, hence also leadership requirement. To be a good leader in this new normal time, basically you need to assume additional responsibilities, as we say here. Right? How can you handle this increased level of complexity to engage these multiple roles might be something useful for the future. Okay. So here are my inputs. I hope you feel these are something useful in maybe can provoke some thinking and thought in your side. And I'm now open for question and looking forward to your inputs. Okay. Yeah, Rosalind, I see your hand. Do you want to use voice or do you want to type? Either way would work. So sorry, Rosalind, do you?
I have another question here, Professor Lee. While we wait to hear from Rosaline. Oh, she's
Okay,
here now.
sure.
Don't worry. I think she's connecting now. So can you hear us, Rosaline?
Yes, I can hear you. Yes.
I think she's on. I think she's on mute. But,
Okay. So okay. Yeah. So
it's
maybe
okay.
let me start. Let me start answering some questions already coming in the chat. Okay.
Perfect. Okay.
So I see Esther. Hello, Esther. Nice to seeing you. So I think your question is that what is a big thing leaders are doing wrong? Wow, the new normal. This varies a lot. I think that probably I haven't been able to see a common pattern in this domain, but probably what I see here is that a challenge is that leaders might encounter is because of a personal stress they experience on themselves. Right, basically, this comes to the point number 6 about leading oneself. When we are also in a more challenging situation, we might lose perspective. We might be carried away too much by the fire in front of us. We need to maybe address the crisis right away. Then this kind of loss of perspective might make them make decisions that are not in the best interest of the organization, like the firing example, right? So basically, so there might not be like one single thing, but I think there is like lack of the capability to find balance in self and then translate that aspect into the proper decision-making things they need to do, including taking care of people, taking care of communication, being transparent, being because the vision part is also be share information with people, right? So that's basically one thing that can happen in this space. So let me move to the question of Pablo, right? Pablo, you also asked what to do when the senior management and owners are not aligned with this line of thought. Wow, how to influence them? This is a very difficult question because basically it involves of managing upward leadership, right? Leading your boss. This is already challenging in typical normal time, and this is definitely more challenging moment. One way of doing that probably is to gently sharing this inspiration or ideas in a very soft way, depending on your relationship with them. Let them see this possibility. But if they are not fully aligned, I think that another thing that we probably can have more control of is starting to do it from your side. You probably cannot influence everything, but there are some decisions that you can engage in. You can decide things under your control, under your structure, without touching upon other part. So when you can do something well on your side, you deliver some result. People see the good things that happen in your side. Eventually, you can capture their attention, and eventually, you can convince them with more evidence and concrete results. Right? That might be a kind of one way, the two way you can combine to somehow pass this kind of influence. Okay. Then let me pass on to the next one. How can we overcome lack of transparency and trust from Bassam? Wow. I'm not fully sure I understand the question. So because this lack of transparency and trust, do you mean that your boss are not transparent with you or lack of transparency from your side? So what I want to emphasize when I mention about the framework in this reflection is about our leadership role. I hope that we use this framework to guide our own leadership behavior, but not use this framework to assess, to judge our boss or our colleagues or people outside. Right? So maybe think first about how do I start to be the one who can be transparent, who can enact actions to generate trust. I think lack of trust needs to be built. It's not there automatically. And the best way of building trust is basically the point number 1, the empathy, the caring. When people feel that you are authentically caring about them, basically that's a starting point of trust. When you start to be proactively, transparently sharing information, providing the vision, then people will connect with you better. That probably will be a point I would like to encourage you to look into and start. Okay. Yeah. Let me move on. So Andy, thank you for the question. How do we help leaders to rediscover their purpose at a time when they are overstressed? Wow. Again, also an interesting but also challenging big question. I think that it's not that easy to influence others, to educate, to enlighten others. This is probably a typical, not that easy thing to do. But if you really need to do that, I would say that it depends really on that person, and you probably need to use a very individual approach. So find a way, a channel that this person can connect to. Some people might be very open for a conversation, a dialogue. If you can talk to this person, you can share some thoughts on that. This probably can be one way of influencing. But some leaders might be less receptive to that kind of information. So what kind of channel would be more useful? Eventually, this will be probably a kind of longer and more detailed discussion. Understanding of the context of the person will be required. But again, like the question I mentioned earlier, I would encourage you, all of us, to maybe to start focusing on working on ourselves first. When you can demonstrate the value of doing that, you deliver the result. Eventually, you can get more currency in convincing, in moving people. Okay. Yeah. So, Basam, your question on how to motivate employees working from home? Wow. This is a big question. Maybe I want to just invite you to think about one question to start with, right? If when you want to motivate people, maybe the first thing we need to understand is that what do they need? What are they looking for? So what really can touch their expectation? When the better you understand what they want, what they need, and you can address to those elements, then they will become motivated. This motivation doesn't need to come from money, rewards, incentives. It can come from something very simple. For example, if you can understand that some people are challenging, struggling with homework, with children there, can you design a way to facilitate their life? If this is taken care of, they will be committed. They feel grateful, and they will be motivated to work. So it's basically this, going back to the empathy, understanding, and then translate that to your design of work, how you connect people, how you design your work. That would be one way that you can mobilize and motivate people more properly when they work from home. Okay. So I see Anna. How would you suggest we manage conflict or change in this online setting? Wow. Thank you. This is also a very interesting, but also not easy question. Conflict in this online setting, generally it can be related to a kind of reduced quality of communication. So basically, we do not understand each other properly. We might not see each other's consideration and constraint. So I think that maybe one thing to work on this is to, from the bottom, from the root, how can we enhance the quality of communication from the first place? So that this basically, I refer to the social bridging part, particularly on the cognitive connection side. What kind of information can be shared so that people understand each other's condition well, each other's perspective, position, needs? When these are made clear and made understandable, I think that the ground for conflict will be reduced. However, when conflict really happened, what can we do? Well, I guess that this probably will be a leadership responsibility, that you might need to find another space to engage the person, understand what are the root, and eventually there's no one single answer, but you might either be the mediator, or you probably want to offer some insight for them to at least find what is the core root and what can we find a good way to resolve it. Sorry for not being able to go into more specifics, because this really requires very specific understanding of the context. But in general, this is basically clarification of expectation, clarification of the context, and then foster trust. Then that can reduce lots of conflict to happen. Okay. Well, additional tools, I do probably not have an immediate answer to that. I think this is basically to explore. Also, there are quite a few new tools emerging as well. So social media, even WhatsApp, different kind of things. Check them out. You might not need to use all of them, but I think it's good practice as a manager, as a leader, to understand what are the tools out there that is possible for you to mobilize. And then you need to analyze your situation and then eventually try them out, experiment, and then see how it works or not work. And then you probably can improve, change, mobilize, combine, be creative in this space. Okay. So I think that probably we are already in the end of time, right? So I'm happy to stay on if you want to continue to have some conversation. But for those who need to leave, I would like just to thank you for being here, for joining us. I hope that the conversation has been useful and provide you some useful idea and insight. And I'll be happy to stay in contact with you if you want to have an ongoing exchange. And thank you again for Spanish Chamber of Commerce for this organization and invitation.
Brilliant. Yes, thank you, Professor Lee. We really appreciate it. I don't mind if you want to answer a few more questions now, or if not, we could ask the guests if they would like to write to you directly by your email address, whichever you would prefer. Would you rather that the attendants write to you directly at your email address?
Either way, I can stay on a little bit as well. Yes. I see there are still some questions coming from the Q&A side. I haven't looked into that part. Yeah.
Okay,
so some of them have been already discussed. Yeah.
Okay. If you would like to answer a couple more now, that's fine with us.
Okay. No, I think that similarly the Q&A questions have been already shifted into the chat, right? Okay. And I see another one. So how do we facilitate change management in this online environment? Coming from Anna. So in the online environment, managing change is more difficult in the way that the shared vision is more challenging to pass. To lead change, I think that we want to make sure that people understand and see a clear direction where we are moving into. So this vision needs to be there so that people are willing to go there. But when we are online, as we mentioned earlier, the communication channel and quality are more reduced. So it might be more difficult to make this vision clearly and well articulated and passed. I think that one important way is first, going back to the social bridging side, maybe you want to discover places that to increase this understanding of the vision. But again, I think that the second important point is to provide this emotional connection with that change process. Basically, change itself is a big topic, right? Change would not necessarily easily happen when we just try to rationalize it. We want to argue people to convince people from their cognitive side to say that why we need to do that. We also need to mobilize people with their heart, with the emotion, with the feeling inside. So online definitely limited the space we can do that. But still, I think that these are still the spaces that you can explore. What can we do when we need to connect people in online, but still convey those changes? So I think that is still probably, I will also want to encourage you to think that we are not limited to pure online. It's still a kind of combination. So like I mentioned earlier, you can be the architect. You decide how much percentage of online and much online you want to have. So you probably can foster a kind of specific design that can still allow you to somehow mobilize people. If you want to facilitate change, to share the vision, to communicate them, to touch them, connect with the emotion and heart, that might be done in some occasion when you can really see them. You can somehow foster a presential space, a moment that you can advance that kind of change process and some other things. Eventually more routine, more regular updating that can be handled online. So it's about a kind of creative combination of all the available tools and instruments you have. But definitely you also need to mobilize the traditional, conventional change management tools, right? Change management itself is already a big topic. It's basically you master that basic concept and try to see that in this online new normal space, what are possible. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So I don't know, Rosalind, because you raised your hand, I don't know whether you can come back or you want to still raise questions in either other way, or any other people you want to still share some thoughts or discuss something, I'll be very happy to have this ongoing conversation. You can even unmute yourself. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not sure if Rosalina is there. I just checked, and she does have permission to speak.
Okay.
We've given her permission to speak on Zoom.
Okay.
I think that is that all of the questions. I think now, right there.
Well, that's what I have found so far. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, Rosalind, thank you. I see your comment. Well, if there's no further question, I will just maybe give the floor back to Hannah, and thank you very much again. And then look forward to your leadership role in the future. So hope that this reflection can help you to enable you to engage in this new leadership role, leading your company, your people into the new future. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Professor Lee. That was really, really informative session. Lots of good food for thought there that we can take away. And it was great that it was interactive as well, so we could hear what the other participants thought as well. And it was great that we had so many questions too. And thank you for answering all of those. Everyone, you will have seen Professor Lee's email address there on the screen if you had any other questions, but I can circulate that afterwards as well. But yeah, thank you so much, Professor Lee, for your time this morning. We really appreciate it. And I'd just like to encourage everyone to keep an eye on the events page of the Spanish Chamber of Commerce in the UK's website, because we hold a lot of other webinars too, and we have a lot planned for the upcoming weeks. So thank you so much, Professor Lee. We appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you, Hannah.
All the best.